that I can't remember the name of.
Just played it?
Yeah, and I played it on my phone, and no one could hear it. And I was like, yeah. It's never happened again. What's that?
That's what I was
We are so excited to have Isle McElroy and Abbi Jacobson with us tonight to celebrate the paperback launch of Isle's incredible novel, People Collide. Before we get officially started, I just have a few logistics to point out for how tonight's event is going to go. First up, we will be doing a hand-raised audience Q&A towards the end of the discussion, so please start thinking of questions to ask and hold on to them. After the talk tonight, Isle will be around to sign and personalize your books at the alcove next to where you checked in. We'll let you know where and when to start lining up for that. And finally, if you're joining us virtually on the YouTube live stream, we would love to encourage you to buy a copy of People Collide online using the link in the live stream description. Okay, now let's get into this. Wait, is the music still on? What is that? Thank you. Okay, now let's get into this. This book feels like Freaky Friday's older, cooler, queer sibling.
Sleepyhead is the name.
People Collide follows newlyweds Eli and Elizabeth and the chaotic sequence of events that occurs when Eli leaves their apartment to find that he and his wife have switched bodies. His wife in his body has vanished. Through Eli's search for answers and for Elizabeth, this novel beautifully explores how we navigate our relationships, how we navigate the world around us, and how so much of that hinges on our sense of self and the way we're perceived. There's so much here to discuss, so I'm going to read some bios, and then we're going to get into tonight's conversation.
You'll find
Isle McElroy is a non-binary author based here in New York. The writing has appeared in many publications such as the New York Times, The Atlantic, and The Cut, and they have received fellowships from the Bread Loaf Writers Conference, the Tin House Summer Workshop, and the Sewanee Writers Conference. In May of 2021, Isle founded Debuts and Redos, a reading series for authors who published books during the pandemic. Their first novel, The Atmospherians, was named an editor's choice by the New York Times, and People Collide was named a Best Book of 2023 by outlets such as Vogue, NPR, and Electric Literature, among others. As I mentioned earlier, Abbi Jacobson joins Isle in conversation tonight. Abbi is a writer, producer, actor, and director, best known as the co-creator and co-star of the Comedy Central series Broad City, as well as the Amazon Prime series A League of Their Own. She's a New York Times bestselling author of I Might Regret This and Carry This Book, and she can be seen in Netflix's upcoming series, No Good Deed. Okay, that is all from me. Please join me in giving Isle and Abbi a very warm welcome.
Yeah.
Hi. Wow. Hi. Hi, YouTube Live. I live stream most things on YouTube of my life. So this is not weird for me.
It's really strange. Abbi has actually took the GoPro off.
Yeah.
To
I was on it. I was
She's
like,
been. It's been really weird. Everywhere we went, talking to strangers, putting them on her GoPro.
Yeah, we were just at a drink and I had the GoPro out, so I'm sure you all were tuning in. Yeah. But thank you all for coming. This is my first time in this Books Are Magic, which is exciting.
Just as magic as the other
It's
one.
just as magic as the other one. How do you feel?
I feel good. Thanks for being here, everybody. This rules.
Are you going to begin with the reading?
Yeah, I'm gonna read
Okay, I'm going to stop.
from my own book.
Great.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I'm gonna read from the second chapter of the book. So what's the deal with this mic? Where am I mic'd? I have a.
So this one's just for the live stream, and this one's for the audience.
Cool. Thank you. All right. I'm gonna read from the second chapter. First, a girl was born. She was born in a small town in rural Michigan to parents who knew how to raise her. She was given a name, Elizabeth, and when traded between the arms of her mother and the arms of her father, gently kissed on the top of the head. Her parents were rigidly dignified people invested in all forms of improvement. Her mother listened to problems professionally. People came to her with stories of egotism and trauma and grief, and she listened and nodded and hummed. Her father fed the most creative minds in the world. He sustained the brain power required to nourish artistic success. A photographer in his 20s, he now prepared the meals for artists at an artist retreat. The parents carried Elizabeth home to a 2-story farmhouse in rural Michigan. Their woodsy town served as a way station for serious artists working on serious projects. The parents liked living close to serious art. They wished to raise their daughter inside the blast radius of creation. They raised her with an esteemed and discerning eye about what mattered and didn't, was good and what wasn't, what was true, what was false, powerful, melodramatic, necessary, and tacky. She would be someone important. 10 months after the girl was born, a boy was born in New Jersey to parents unsure what they meant to each other. The parents were married but far from in love, coupled the way gun couples with the underside of a desk. They barely arrived at the hospital the day of the birth, still grasping and packing the required supplies an hour after labor began. The boy was named Elijah. The mother selected the name to give him a sense of historical worth. He was hairy at birth and smelled, according to the father, like peanuts. And though the father couldn't say why he found this disturbing, he found it disturbing nevertheless, a reminder of the boy's otherness, until, so unnerved by the scent, the father left his little bud of a family for a woman who lived across town. The mother was not prepared to raise a boy on her own, but had no other choice. Men disappear, their children remain. She'd been told this as a girl, but some things you never believe until they become part of your life. She created spreadsheets at a company where she and her colleagues split the years into quarters. Eli found meaning on the living room floor, sitting before the rippled maw of a projection TV. From age 2 until age 17, the boy found love in the screen. It was there for him. It watched over him. It met his need for intimacy and attention. His mother was one of those mothers that people call bad when the accurate description is busy. The father was not a bad father, but merely a bad father for his only child. And, to his credit, he performed a serviceable role stepfathering the children of the woman he married after leaving the mother. As the boy grew close to the screen, the girl's parents taught her about art and the world. They instilled in her a sense of moral purpose, superiority, passion. They read her brief illustrated biographies about exemplary women like Harriet Tubman and Marie Curie and Frida Kahlo and Amelia Earhart. These women inspired in her an appreciation of beauty and justice. At age 10, she started a community cleanup program along the main road in town that expanded into a service where children took out the trash for elderly neighbors. At 12, she volunteered on the weekends reading to children in hospitals. She made the varsity basketball team as a freshman and started every game until graduation. She had a brother, 4 years her junior, who she only playfully teased, not once with a flicker of malice, and on the rare occasions they fought, she prided herself on restoring the peace between them over a heaping scoop of ice cream or a slice of pizza. At 16, she spearheaded voting drives and raised funds for abortion providers. She was a good person, the goodest they came. She came from a place that valued greatness and knew it. The most serious artists in the world produced their serious art in her town. The enlightened drank from the same water she did. They watched the same sun descend over the very same trees. Greatness did not intimidate her. She existed through the accumulation of achievements, awards and honors and accolades and receptions and merits and plaques hung on her like ornaments on a tree. When the time came, she applied to only the most elite and isolated colleges in the country. They served her the way engines serve airplanes, lifting her to esteemed, predictable heights. In New Jersey, Eli smoked marijuana out of a Diet Pepsi can in his kitchen. He balanced on an exercise ball while playing football video games. Block party's silent alarm buzzed on repeat over animated tackling sounds. He had friends, but not because they valued his humor or charm. He had friends because his mother worked late. When she returned home, she didn't much care what went on in her house. At her house, teenagers drank in the basement on Wednesdays. At her house, teenagers fucked in the bathroom and puked in the bushes. Eli's town was not a town of importance. The closest thing to a thing that ever happened in town was the filming of a summer camp slasher in the 80s. The horror movie gained a cult following for its outlandish deaths. The town accommodated fans of the film with a tiny museum and tours of major landmarks in the movie. Growing up in a town where tourists visited to commemorate the gruesome deaths of forgettable actors did not instill in Eli a desire to achieve or accomplish. He lived without ambitions the way slugs live without shells. When it came time to apply for colleges, he only applied to the most mediocre institutions that America offered, the institutions where his friends were applying. And because he was not a bad student, although not a student worthy of praise, he was admitted to all of them. He chose a school in the desert known for its parties. If someone had listed the schools that admitted Elizabeth, Pomona and Vassar and Hinman and Dartmouth and Amherst and Pratt, he would have guessed these were the names of catalog sweaters or generals from fledgling American wars. She accepted a full ride at Hinman, the number 3 ranked college in the nation, according to U.S. News and World Report, whereas Eli's school bounced around the 200s, he would have discovered, if he ever bothered to look. They came from different places and went to different places. They were on separate trajectories. They were never meant to meet each other. Surely they were not destined for love, someone would think, if that someone poured over their lives. But no one, that same someone should know, is ever meant for anyone else. No life is ever the skinniest bit of predictable. People collide. They bounce away after collisions or veer away to avoid those collisions, creating lives accidentally. Circumstances pinball people together. This is called fate because chance is too scary a word. People collide. People collide. Elizabeth and Elijah were people, no better than anyone else. Fortunately, no worse. Thank you.
Wow. I love that.
Thank you.
I know you've
Are we done now?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Thank you
Okay.
so much for
Yeah.
coming. I know you've done this before where a paperback has come out, but how do you feel? It came out today, right?
It
This
did,
is
yeah.
pub day for the paperback version. So a year ago came out hardcover. How do you feel on the right now?
I feel, let's see, physically a little tired. I biked around a lot. Oh, hey, Jenny. I feel good. I'm excited that it gets to exist in this other form. I feel like it's just like, I mean, I think what comes up like when you release a hardcover book is that you realize that you're actually thinking about something much further into the future. And then when the paperback comes up, you're like actually even further into the future. So now I'm like who is that? Like it's sort of like I'm like I don't know, like hanging out with an old friend or trying to like I haven't seen this book in a while and I'm trying to remember like how we got along with each other. And that part's kind of exciting, and it is really cool to be, I think, reminded of the thing that I did. I think a lot of like writing is about like the book comes out and then it sort of exists on its own, totally separate from me. And I think the paperback is another opportunity to like re-engage with it. And I think that feels really, I feel jazzed about that.
Yeah, I think you should.
Yeah.
I think a lot of people wait for the paperback sometimes, right? Okay, so just to see, how many of you have read the book already? Okay, so there's a good amount that haven't. Okay.
Yeah.
You might be spoiling a little bit.
Yeah.
Just saying. But that's exciting. I think a lot of people came that haven't read it yet. It does have a second life, which is exciting.
Yeah, no, I'm jazzed. Thank you for being here. Yeah.
Okay, so I wrote a lot down. I'm going to be reading my questions. Sorry, just to say that.
You're not even going to give me a
Clearly.
chance to answer them. You're just going to
I'm
read
just going to
them.
1, 2, 3,
Yeah,
4,
yeah,
5.
yeah.
I'm going to read all my questions and then all your answers. if
Okay,
that's
great. Yeah.
So I've been thinking a lot about this book.
Yeah.
I happen to be
Wait,
doing,
should we say? Yeah.
Yeah.
Like,
to give you some context, I am currently, like truly currently, every day right now, writing an adaptation of People Collide for the small screen.
yeah.
And we had a conversation last week.
For the Apple Watch is what you're writing for.
Yeah,
Yeah,
for
yeah.
the teeniest screen. It actually hasn't come out yet. It's even teenier.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's for your toe. Yeah.
Yeah.
I meant for TV. But we had a conversation last week because it's so intense to adapt something that you love and that works so well and that is so full and just as a reader, I got so much out of reading it. And so I needed to make sure that I knew how scared I was in tackling this. Because it is, I really think for those of you who read it, for those of you who haven't yet, you will find out this is like, it's so much. Like it is such like a meaty, juicy book about so much. And I think everyone will come into it taking obviously what you do with any book, but so I'm thinking a lot about it. I'm in the deep end here, and I'm really with these characters, and obviously I'm so much is different about it. But in thinking so much about these characters and these themes and ideas that came up for me around love and relationships and identity and place and family and like legacy, all these things. It was just a reminder. This isn't even a question yet. I'm just going to say a bunch of stuff first. It was just a reminder to me about how complex we are and complicated. These characters are really well written and full and complicated. And okay, so in putting Eli and Elizabeth in this particular situation, which I'm just going to set, you know what happens, right, from the introduction?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
They swap bodies. You'll have to get into it. But they swap. In this particular situation, I felt there was like this expansiveness that you created to be even more complex than they were as individuals. I guess now, a year after this has come out into the world and even reading that chapter again, I mean, how do you feel about Eli and Elizabeth? That was such a long preamble for half of a question, sort of, but this is how tonight's going to go. But like, how do you feel about them? Are they like sort of children? Do you still think about them?
Yeah, what a great half question. Yeah, I mean, of course I'm like, of course still thinking about, I both think about them and like I think there's a kind of haunting that happens when you write a book, and like especially like when it's published, and I'm like pretty far into a new project right now, but there are still the ways that I can hear these characters like sort of existing in the current project that I'm working on. And I feel like that is when I like hear them the most often or think about them the most often, is like how the people who I'm like sitting with now maybe like relate to them. And I feel like everyone is always like the maybe family map. There's always going to be some connections between them. But I'm not thinking about them like directly all of the time. More what happens is something will remind me of what I was trying to say in this book, and I'll be reminded of that. And those are the moments that kind of like surprise me. And it's hard to even like anticipate when that's going to happen. It's hard to know like what I'm trying to think, but then suddenly there will be moments where I'm like, oh, I'll have a conversation with someone who will remind me that like this is a conversation that I'd had with myself like 2 years ago. And that is a really surprising thing, which makes me feel like a total narcissist. But those like, I think those are the most exciting moments for me, is to realize like that they're still with me in ways that I don't like. I've so metabolized these characters that I'm not even thinking about them as like characters so much. I've just sort of absorbed them and their like ideas, their selfhood is like, and it feels like I have a real habit of like bringing up things that like friends are going through to like, you know, support arguments, like, oh, like a friend of mine just did, like, and it feels very similar to that when I'm like having conversations. I'm like reminded of the things that I was working through at that time, but they seem to exist on their own. Like I've kind of like left them there, like and now like if they are my children, then like you are now the babysitter, and I'm like, and I've been gone for a mysteriously long amount of time, and you're sort of like, well, I guess I'm gonna have to raise these kids.
Come on. I do feel that way. A big thing I have been married now for almost a year, and marriage is such a big part of this book. Marriage and partnership and relationships, and I've been married a year, and
today this is how you're celebrating.
This is my anniversary today. No, but and even before we got married, I guess I feel like a lot of things you watch or read, there are often relationships, romantic or not, are marked by these big joyous occasions. And I found in my personal life that sometimes some of the more difficult, harder relationships are actually the ones where like I like to mark of like, this is like, these are definitive, and this is like, we got through this, and that's a definitive thing versus like a big anniversary. And I feel like what happens with this relationship is like the ultimate thing to get, I don't even know if I necessarily say to get through, but to go through. I mean, like we're not, I don't know, maybe someone is experiencing this right now and we just don't know, but I don't know. Like,
if you are, please raise your hand.
Was that? Don't raise your hand. I kind of like to think that people are. But I don't know. I just, in thinking about this relationship and this marriage, and the marriage in the book happens sort of, it feels like it's sort of because of this opportunity that Elizabeth gets. Not that they're not in love, and not that they might not have gotten married later, but it's sort of prompted by that, the move abroad. I don't know, like, was that something on your mind about like, okay, putting them at this stage in their relationship and having this huge, I don't know how you would, like, fracture or like combustion forces them to look at the relationship more than most like difficult scenarios. But again, a quarter of a question. My questions are like ideas put into the room. Just for anyone to kind of answer.
That are delivered in a sort of like inquisitive tone.
Yes.
No, but I think like what's so exciting is like hearing you ask that question. Like I think this actually makes me think like maybe a better way to have answered your previous question is like there are things that I'm still discovering about this book that I didn't really like anticipate doing, and I teach a novel class right now, like teaching how to write a novel, and there's some days when I'm in there teaching, I was like, oh, I don't know how to do this. Like, and then if my students are watching on YouTube, I do know how to do it. But like,
this is all a joke.
No, but that there is so much of it that is like to be like exceptionally new agey. There is so much of it that you just don't understand, that you like haven't been able to like sense that you're trying to do until much later. And I think that's like what this is making me think of is like the first year of marriage is the first time when I think something that I didn't anticipate. I have been married, I'm no longer married, but like something that dawned on me when I was married is how much things change, like how different the expectations are. And I think the first year of marriage is a strange like moment when everything is suddenly so much more difficult. And it is the moment when you are forced to like actually confront that you are going to try to understand this other person for a very long time. And I think is the moment when you are forced to be like, in an argument, you're going to have to start seeing it from their perspective, because like there's like you have committed to something with each other. You can't really hold on to your own narrative in the same way. And potentially like subconsciously or on some sort of like artistic level, I think the book is a way to engage with that reality that I never really anticipated for myself, and that like the body swap is a way to show how the first year of marriage really is that moment when you can't help but begin to like have to see the other person for who they are. And I think this really just literalizes something that is happening emotionally in a way that is pretty shocking, or I think can be very surprising when you realize that the stakes are so different. Even if you're living together with a partner, even if everything is fine, because suddenly like you're living together with a partner and suddenly like, I don't know, a bunch of people show up to be like, we see you're in love. Like that like puts a lot of pressure on things. And you have to change your own perspective about how you see this other person. You have to begin to understand them and to sort of will yourself to understanding them. And I think that is like, it kind of happens for these characters rather than, and I think it happens for everyone who enters into a marriage, even if you are not one of the few people in this audience who has had this happen to you. It's going to happen to you emotionally.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What you just said in terms of you being surprised what the book, not necessarily means, but like sort of in the aftermath of putting it out there, being surprised by whether it's other people's reaction or your own reaction afterward. Is there anything that you can think of that you've, like reactions or anything that, this wasn't a written question, off the cuff here. I don't know, because it is interesting. I remember putting things out into the world and like reading a review and being like, yeah, we were doing that. Like we were totally doing that. Like where you're sort of confronted with someone else's experience of it, and that's true. That is what they got from it. But I'm curious if that happened to you in putting this out.
No, everything that I do is completely intentional.
Okay.
I think what has been, I think it is both of those things. It can be a surprise to me, but also be intentional in that it is functioning at a level that I didn't know that I wanted to engage with. And I think for me, that's like the question of class in this book is something that I didn't really set out to write, that these characters who were coming from very different, like, I would not even say financial classes, but I think they're coming from very different, like, artistic or even, like, aesthetic classes. And I think that's something that is, I won't say difficult to capture, but is, like, rare, I think, to capture, is that I think growing up around artists changes the way that you relate to culture. And I think Eli is someone who definitely does not grow up around artists, and Elizabeth does. And I think even if their financial situations aren't like a huge, like, Rockefellers versus, like, I don't know, Ragged Dick, is that even a reference anymore? Like, it's an actual book. Like, it's like, yeah, we're getting a thumbs up from the crowd. That I think there is a way that they relate to how they believe that they have value in the world. And that is something that I didn't really anticipate writing about. And I think there was one review in the Washington Post that really picked up on that. And I think that was one where I was like, oh, like, duh. Like, of course this was something that I was engaging with and thinking about, even if I wasn't, like, thinking about it directly. But I also think that there is a kind of magic that happens, is that like, if I had known that I was thinking about it, it would have been, like, so bad. And I would have been like, well, I guess Elizabeth is the richest woman in the world. Yeah. And, like, and it would have been so heavy-handed and stupid. And because I engaged it at a level that was, like, both unconscious, but, like, probably a little bit intentional, then I was actually able to make it human and realistic. And that, I think, that is my new agey take on novel writing, is that you need to, I mean, my take is often that you need to be very stupid to write a novel, and that you need to just sort of keep going and not really understand what you're doing a lot of times. And I think that just a lot of it is about faith. And I think there was a lot of that in this book, and I both, like, discover or realize, I realized retroactively the thing that I believed only after I've completed it, and other people have sort of been able to reflect to me what it is that, like, I believe and what I have said.
I love that, though. I think that is one of the things that's so incredible about the experience of like putting something into the world, and the reader experiences it, puts their experience back. It's like books are magic. You said it too. You said it's a little bit of magic, but it is like that was probably something you've been thinking about, wanting to express, and maybe if that wasn't the most intentional, top of mind thing, I love that was in there, and that someone else sort of showed you or pointed it out, like, oh, this was what I got from it. I just think that's. I
remember taking a like novel writing class in grad school where everyone would just like submit a full novel. And I remember leaving that class being like, there's nowhere to hide in a novel. Like eventually, like something you've been thinking about, even if you don't know that you've been thinking about, is going to come through. And like you read someone's book and you're like, ooh, like especially their first draft when they haven't like sort of like mind swept it for like their own like insecurities. Then like I think that is it's
always in there.
Yeah,
it's inescapable. Okay, something I love. You guys who haven't read it, you're gonna love it. The way you write Eli and Elizabeth's parents, and the pull that they still have with their parents. There's like a guilt and a just like, and also then the in-law experience. I am guessing some of that is written from personal experience, but it's so it's so defining the way. I just learned so much about the characters through the way that you're writing their parents, obviously. But tell me about that, like Johanna. I say Joanna, but there's an H, so sometimes.
Yeah, you can.
Okay.
Yeah.
But I mean, I just found them to be like, which at the end, like you really go there. But I felt like that is like a big curve that you took, especially with Elizabeth's mom.
Yeah.
Tell me a little bit about the parental connection.
So I don't think you and I have been able to talk about this yet, but I think something that's like really, I think which was something that definitely that I discovered after writing the book, is that I think all of these characters are like the same people, but at different places in their lives. And I think the book is very much put that in your script. But there are different iterations of artists at different stages of their life. There is like Eli and Elizabeth, who are at the sort of like young bohemian phase of everything is in front of them. There's Desi and Kirill, who have recently were practicing artists and that have begun to give up. And then there's Joanna and Henry, who have kind of given up on their careers as artists. And I think the reason why the parents have such an impact on these characters is because all of their doubts, their disappointments continue to feed back in, and they are constantly in a relationship. And I think less so Eli, because his mom isn't an artist in the same way that Elizabeth's parents are, but definitely for Elizabeth, she's in relationship to those like failures or those disappointments that preceded her, and everything that she achieves is going to be in relationship to that, and it's going to be shaped by that or a reaction to that. And I imagine a sort of like Donnie Darko like beam between the two of them, or sort of like, or some sort of like netting in which like the further she goes, it will like sort of shape the connection, and they're constantly influencing each other, because they're like artists at different stages of their careers, and I think the parents represent one possibility that Elizabeth doesn't realize or doesn't imagine could happen to her, even as she is confronted with the reality of it every day. And I think that, to me, is the impact of the parents, that they exist there, they're an expression of her potential future, even as she doesn't think that is actually her future. And I think that she is actively not thinking that is largely about her refusal to accept that as a reality in her life. Yeah.
I'm gonna rethink where I was going. In the end of the chapter that you read, I love that we get to the title of the book. I love knowing the backstory of how someone named something. Did you know what the title was when you got there, or did you get there and know that had to be the title?
So this is a really great example of you need to be stupid to write a novel, because the original title was Codependency, and then after, and then after I wrote that, and then I was like, oh wait, that's way better, and then I just and went back there and sort of plucked it out. So I didn't really know that it was the title when I wrote that. It was just sort of there. I liked how it sounded, and then I went back and was like, this is a much better title. What was I thinking? And so that felt really good to sort of find that.
Yeah, it's so interesting because listening to you read it, it is kind of underlined again there.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. I gotta get to the sex scene.
Yeah. I was asked to not read it tonight. I've read it so many times.
I think that's
yeah.
Also for those people who haven't read it yet.
Yeah.
I think
Hubba hubba.
Hubba
yeah,
hubba.
Yeah.
I don't know if I've read a sex scene that was so well written in that way. Actually, I just had
You're gonna name a better one.
No,
No,
I just had lunch with a friend who
Yeah.
read the book
Yeah.
recently, and she said that she was reading it on vacation with her parents and had to go inside. They don't even know what she's experienced. She needed to be alone.
Yeah.
So, okay. There's a world where, after you read the sex scene, I imagine that could have been, the seed of the entire idea of the book.
Yeah.
I don't, what is the process of writing? Did the sex scene come just sort of in the middle, or, sorry, or, you know what I mean? If you had that idea of, people swap and then
Yeah.
sex with each other.
Yeah.
As each other. That could have been oh my goodness, I'm going to write a book where that's centering around that.
Yeah.
Maybe I'm making too much out of the sex scene, but
I mean, you're imagining me as a huge pervert. You're just
no, I just mean that could have been an idea.
Yeah,
what an incredible. It's such a scene.
I mean, I didn't anticipate writing it at all. I don't know. I have no idea how I sort of got to the place of writing it. I think I was dating a lot, and I feel like that's sort of what it was. It was just oh, I should bring some of this in there.
Yeah.
But I think it does also feel like the natural, the only outcome that they can get to is this needs to eventually happen, and that there is all this anticipation between them. And so that to me, I didn't anticipate writing that scene when I started writing this book, but I remember writing that scene really quickly, and that it and that it just seemed right to do it. And I don't know how I didn't anticipate it. It arrived, and
It arrived.
I mean, I was used a synonym there. Yeah. So, but I feel I have no idea how it came about, and that feels very much as it seemed natural that they do it. They were in this place that for them was a source of erotic tension, surrounded by art. There was space for them to go off on their own. And I think it was really the conversation that led to it, is that Elizabeth was able to express, I think maybe for the first time in the relationship, the disappointments that she's had about their sexual connection with each other. And I think it was finally an opportunity for them to rebuild that or reimagine that.
Love that. I'm going to ask a couple more questions, and I'm going to open it up to you all. Okay, so this is something I've been thinking about a lot, and this is kind of a two-part question, or maybe just two separate questions. Okay, so did you think about why they swapped? Do you even feel that, oh, go ahead.
It never crossed my mind.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's a big question I've been thinking about.
Yeah, I feel like that's the difference between TV and books.
Yeah. Okay. Wow.
Like,
okay.
like I imagine there's someone in like a suit somewhere that's like, why? Why? Yeah, like
That's me in the suit. I write in a suit, and I'm like, why did this happen?
Very John
Yes,
Cheever.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, so another potential suit question.
Yeah.
Okay. Do you think they ever swap back?
I mean, this is gonna be so coy, but it's not my job to know anymore.
I know.
And that,
No,
like,
I don't know.
I know. I feel like you're like trying to like. I see you like reading. Like, this is like, are you like copying my homework right now? Like, it's just
I think that these are.
like,
Listen, I think that these are like the big questions
Yeah.
that you posed for us,
yeah.
me, all of us.
Yeah.
And I think
For
I guess I'm
certain
just
people in this
curious-
room,
I think
yeah.
I'm just curious, like,
Yeah.
if that was going through your mind of like,
Yeah.
maybe in the back of my mind, I have an idea of the why, but also I kind of love that it's not about that.
I think for me, the question of why is that it would have taken me out of the things that most interest
Yeah.
me. And like, if I would have gotten like, it's like I knew that as soon as I started to answer that question for myself, I would lose the momentum of where my curiosity actually was. And I think like the curiosity is in like the result and how they deal with this. As for them switching back, I mean, I think because I wasn't that interested in the why, I still like, to me, I'm much more interested in like, how do you accept this new version of your life with each other, versus like what will happen when they eventually, which to me that seems like too, I won't say like easy, but it like like I think if they were to switch back, it would introduce a new like range of questions that I also don't know how to answer, and that excites me. But I also know that I wasn't prepared to start to answer those in this book, or like start to ask them or engage with those in this book. But if they want to swap back, if someone were maybe working on some sort of like artistic,
I don't know. I don't know either yet. It's just a thing I've been.
No, but I'm. What makes me curious about that is what new problems that would introduce that I can't even anticipate right now. And I feel like most of like sort of fiction writing for me is about like anticipating one problem ahead, and that seems like 6 problems ahead for me. And like if I start to think that far in advance, I lose track of what most interests me.
I love that.
Yeah.
I'm gonna take that into my suit writing daily life.
Yeah.
Okay, so why don't we open it up to you all? Anyone? Okay.
Yeah.
So I love this book.
Thank you.
I really had to think about it. I read it on Sunday, and I was like, "What was that?" But my so my question to you is, why did we get Eli and Joanna's point of view and not Elizabeth?
Yeah.
That's a great question. I'm gonna repeat it for all of you on YouTube. Okay, so the question was, we got Eli and Joanna's point of view in the book. Why did we not get Elizabeth's?
Thank you for that, and thank you so much for reading the book. For me, I think there are a lot of marriage books that make an attempt to kind of show a even sort of 50-50 split. And I kind of was less interested in that. And I think a relationship is always going to be like how one person sort of interprets it, and you can see maybe the reflections of the other person's views of this relationship. And to me, like the scene in the museum where you begin to see all the ways that Eli has been constructing a narrative about his marriage versus how Elizabeth sees it was so important. If you had had the perspective where you had been with Elizabeth and be like, oh, here's what she has been thinking, then there would actually be no surprise, and in my mind, very little like energy in the moment when they actually see each other. Because for the reader, they believe that they're engaging with a level of truth, and then suddenly they're understanding that actually this character has been giving their version of reality versus what this other person, what Elizabeth thinks of things. And I think if we had gotten Elizabeth's perspective, then it actually would have undermined that a little bit. And even as it would have given a greater sense of like, quote unquote, like objectivity or like reality to this, it would have, yeah, I think taken out some of the excitement that comes from realizing as a reader that the story you thought you were being told is much more complicated than it actually is. Yeah. But.
I just wanted to follow up with when you were reading the passage that you did, I always have described myself as other, and I don't think a lot of people get that. Like, I grew up in a straight neighborhood, and you know, being queer myself, I never felt like I fit in. So thank you for writing this story because it was really important, and I'm excited to see what you have next.
Thank you so much. That's so kind. Thank you.
Does anyone else have a question?
I have a related question for each of you. So Abbi, I'm sure you read a bunch of books, but what was it about your encounter with this book that made you go like, I really want to adapt this? And how does it feel, I guess, not just surrendering control of your characters to like readers, but now, you know, to have them be transmuted through the mind of like another great artist?
Yeah.
So there was a two-part question. I'm again just for the phone here.
Yeah.
Okay, the first question actually for me was, what about this book made me really excited to be a part of it and to try and sway Isle into letting me do this.
Yeah.
I think I read this book very fast too. You had said you read it. Yeah. I think I was really blown away. A lot of the book is really internal, and it is about someone going through a big change. And I guess I felt in the last little while that I too have gone through big changes, and I kind of think we all are, but it felt very pointed, and I feel like I'm often in my head, and we're very much in Eli's head. I was just so in immediately with these characters, and again, like them trying to navigate all this newness and who they are and these desires and these changing desires and who they thought they were, and all the relationships are changing. I could go on and on in that ramble. I was just like, I don't remember exactly what I said to you when we first met, but I think it was kind of a similar ramble.
Yeah.
I was just in.
You said, let me do this or else.
I said, let me do this or else.
Yeah.
And I was in my suit. Yeah.
And the second question was, how does it feel for me to be sort of ceding control a lot of it? And I feel like I was texting, or I was like telling Abbi this the other day, like, my feeling is that, like, I'm trying to be like, I'm a cool landlord, right? like I'm sort of like, you know, like, that's my place, but like, you can paint the walls, like, you can, you know, do you want pets? I don't care. Like, so that's what I'm trying to be like, yeah, it's mine, but like, live in it as you will, have people over, but I also think that it is like, really exciting to know that I have taken this as far as I can, as far as my skills can. Like, I'm not a TV writer, I've never really worked in that medium, and so it's exciting to be like, what will someone who has a greater sense of expertise in this medium be able to do with something? And that, I think, is really, like, that rules. And I'm excited to see what happens about that. But as like novelists famously have no control issues, so it will be. I remember for my first book, like before we like sort of chose a cover, like all in the lead up, I was like, you know, I'm not a graphic designer. Like, these people can do whatever they want. And then I got like an email from my editor being like, we're thinking about doing the cover. I was like, here are 25 pages of notes of like what I want to do, and here are like so many comps of other covers, and they all need to be run through me. So get ready, Abbi.
No, but I texted you last week because I have adapted things. It was so funny. I was like, I've never adapted anything, and I was like, I did adapt a thing. But it feels.
Well, Broad City is based on a
Yeah,
Zola
Broad-
novel,
Broad- yeah.
isn't it? Yeah. It's
We really turned it around. Yeah. But I've never like been in contact with the creator either, and I said, you might fucking hate this, and you said, I might. And then I was like, I've been working on it for a little while, and I at first I was like, I know the book inside and out and all the beats and how I'm going to do this, and then I had to be like, okay, the book is over here. The book will exist.
Yeah.
This is going to be very different,
Yeah.
and a lot of the things are going to be like, again, the studs.
Yeah.
The stud. Let's just keep it in the house. The studs are going to be.
You had a great gardening metaphor, though.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. What did I? The
Seeds.
Yeah. The seeds are the same seeds.
Yeah.
But it's just my garden.
Yeah.
It is our garden. It's just tricky. But I feel.
Can someone get my phone?
Yeah,
I need to
I-
read. Yeah, that's like.
But
I swear it was great.
I got to a point where it's like it actually like the best adaptations I think really are very different. Like I like it when something is taken by the different voice and made into something different. So I'm just saying that for everyone in the room that's very scared that I'm taking this incredible book and gonna fuck it up. Anyone else have a question on that note? Okay. Oh, actually, let me just go over here for just.
Yeah.
Since we're talking about adaptation, when you adapt something, especially since this book is so masterful about interiority, maybe it's too soon to answer, but do you have visions of like what devices will you use that will sort of replace that being available to you since we're not reading anymore? You've got time.
Yeah.
First frame, middle, last frame, so with different narrative pressure now.
I think all would be.
Yeah,
Abby,
okay.
what devices do you plan to use? Yeah.
There's been a lot of talk
Thank
about
you.
devices
Yeah.
in here. It's a little too soon for me to say, but
It's not the GoPro. We're not sticking with
it's not the GoPro. You'll have to follow my live day to day to find that. That has been one of the biggest challenges because this is such an internal book and story so far. How can I express so much, whether it's visually or if I do go a certain way with devices? There's a touch of I'm just gonna say there's a touch of voiceover, but it's not too heavy-handed.
Abby and I need to be alone.
But and it was a little pushback because I do have suits on me more than I would like. And sometimes it's really helpful, but there is a little bit of like how to convey the same internal experience outwardly. So that's been a really fun challenge.
Yeah. I love a good voiceover.
Okay, one more question?
Yeah.
Okay, sorry, I wanted to give someone yeah, go ahead. No, you
Oh,
yep,
me?
that's you again.
Yeah.
I didn't realize anyone did. Okay. Sorry, I have a lot of questions.
Yeah.
But so one of the things that when I started reading, I really thought Eli and Elizabeth were the same person. Like I thought like Elizabeth was Eli's authentic self, and then I kind of realized that hey, they're two different people that are married. So I guess I don't know if this is more a question, but with Eli and Elizabeth, do you feel like they're with the switch? They're really finding their true selves authentically.
Yeah. So the question, like, with this switch, are the characters finding themselves or their true selves authentically? And I think so, and I actually will say that this is to go back to some of the questions that Abby was asking earlier. Like, this to me seems what is really exciting about like adaptation is that these are questions that I don't think I was able to like sort of answer fully in this book, but I do think that they are moving towards that, and I'm excited for like what you're going to be able to sort of introduce and how they continue to find out parts about themselves. But I do think that like Eli especially is learning things about himself, learning things about like his relationship to his body that he didn't like think about previously, even like how he like treated Elizabeth. I think there's like a lot of like, and how he sort of wants to move through the world. A lot of that he's beginning to understand in ways that weren't previously possible, and that I think understanding is giving him greater access to, who he actually is. So I would hope so, that something as like, dramatic as this would be able to give these characters an opportunity to sort of understand themselves more deeply. But thank you.
Okay, I think that's it. So Isle's going to be signing books at the front. Thank you all for coming so
thank
much.
Thank you all. There we go. Thank you all so much for coming out tonight. Thank you to everyone who asked questions. Thank you to Abby for moderating such a wonderful conversation. And thank you, Isle, for celebrating this paperback with us. So, some final reminders before we wrap up. If you're still with us on the live stream, you can buy a copy by clicking the link in the description. For those of you with us tonight, we have plenty of additional copies available for purchase in the description. At the table where you checked in, we've got copies of People Collide. We've got copies of Isle's first book, The Atmospherians, which is fantastic, and we want to sell our copies, so buy that one as well. We have graciously pre-signed copies of Abby's wonderful collection. As the fantastic writer Matteo Ascaripour once said, we have a no book left behind policy. So buy those books up at the front. I will be around to sign them. That's going to be happening right where my coworkers are now pointing to. Thank you, coworkers. So we're going to ask that you all grab your personal belongings, sit tight for a second until we get Isle settled back there, and then just line up down the central aisle, curve around to the wall. And that'll be that. Again, thank you all so much for joining us. Let's give these two one last time.